We are joined by an incredible traveler from Colombia. Welcome, Jack Goldstein.
Stefan, a pleasure being with you. Thanks for having me.
When I read your profile in the recent Traveler's Century Club newsletter, I realized I had not had a chance to get to know you or the traveler that has inspired so much of your travels. So let's start with Benjamin of Tudela.
Yes, a fine guy. I'm sorry I never got to meet. We're only 800 years apart, but an inspiration. Uh, Benjamin of Tudela, Spanish guy, uh, was a Jewish traveler who took it upon himself to go the distance and visit any Jewish community as far away as he could. So he traveled through Europe, of course, but a lot in Northern Africa, the Middle East, down to Yemen, Babylon, the Caucasus. Um, and he was able to gather a lot of information from, again, remote and very diverse communities. Um, and he was my inspiration because he was a traveler and he had the Jewish theme to it, which is very important to me. So I've I've been doing that together with my trips, where whether it's business or pleasure, wherever I go, I try to find the synagogue, the community, the cemetery, the museum, somebody that can tell a story. And over the years, I've been able to cover quite a bit of Judaica worldwide, from synagogue and remote places in Siberia to communities in Uganda, Ethiopia, the last remaining shtetl in Krasnaya Sloboda in northeastern Azerbaijan. And
You can't just pass over that so quickly. Tell us about
sorry,
that. Settle.
a shtetl
Yes.
from German or Yiddish, a little town
Mhm.
like Teddy and Fiddler on the Roof.
That's exactly what I was
Little
thinking of.
places
So tell us
where
about
the
this one.
tailor and the policeman and the judge and the milkman, they're all Jewish, and there's only one such remaining place in the entire world, um, outside of Israel, that is. And this place is Krasnaya Sloboda, in northeastern Azerbaijan, near the border with Dagestan. Mountain Jews, they're called.
Mm.
Unique place, amazing place. I mean, a little town next to Cuba, just across the river from Cuba. 3,000 inhabitants, 15 synagogues. Um, very, very unique place. And so places like that are very unique are the type of places that I enjoy visiting wherever I go. You know, Vietnam or um, Morocco or Libya. I try to visit those places.
And I understand you launched a Spanish language blog that we can all translate, and we'll share that when you share it
Yes,
to encapsulate some of these. And what's fascinated me when I think of uh, Judaica related travels, I can think of biblical sites. I can think of, say, the World War II history, which
sure,
you have deep family connection, but you've
sure.
extended that to, say, Entebbe Airport and
Right.
the singular moments in time, some very tragic, but beyond what I think the normal conception would be. So tell us about, say, Entebbe Airport and that experience.
We got there December of 2017, of course, doing the typical gorillas in the DRC and the monkeys in Rwanda trip and the balloon safari. But I made it a point to actually reach two places of interest for Judaica. One is a community near Mbale in southeastern Uganda, the Abayudaya tribe, which exactly 100 years ago decided to convert to Judaism out of spite because the chief uh, was disenchanted with the British superior in the area and decided to convert to tick him off. And now there's 3,000 people that have been following Judaism, mostly the conservative branch of Judaism, in Nabugoye Hill near Mbale. So it coincided with the holiday of Hanukkah. So we spent the last night of Hanukkah with the Abayudaya in Uganda. And then the following day we went to Entebbe, where um, the only reason to go there was to go to the old airport, which is now controlled by the UN. The peace forces taking care of the DRC are stationed in that historic airport. So months in advance, I told the guy that we hired that I wanted to go there, but I didn't feel like I I could tell him the reason why I didn't want to let it be known and wait until the day we would get there to really take a chance and try our luck. And so the day came, we got there, and we had to meet with various people that needed some convincing, and we were able to walk into to the old airport and find at the base of the control tower a beautiful plaque, beautifully written, that remembers the raid to free the hostages back in '76, and that's the type of places that I strive to go to. Again, especially like with any extreme travel, places that few people get to go or actually know that they exist.
Hmm. And to pick a few others, I mean, there's a world of sites. As I said, there's some that call out as history that are very well known, and others that you've dug up.
Sure. Of course, I've done my bit of traveling and visits to concentration and extermination camps and such places. My mother is a Holocaust survivor,
Mm-hmm.
so I have strong connections to the area and the history. But places that are unique, Itil in the Volga Delta. It's the old Khazar capital. The
Mm.
Khazars back in the late 1800s, at least the royal family converted to Judaism in order to be neutral in between Orthodox Russians and Muslim Sassanids in the south. So there's that unique chapter in history where the Khazars of all people converted to Judaism. And to get to Itil was exciting and difficult because first it's a place that is not um, oops, no, que no, necesito conectarme, ayúdame.
Get froze. Just a moment. We'll get him back. I think we're just having a connection
Hello?
issue. Yep, we've got a connection issue. I believe I can hear you, but the video has frozen.
Ah,
There we go. Oop. We had it just a moment. The suspense builds as we continue the stories, and we will hear about the incredible trip that Jack organized. Took a year of planning to bring a group of travelers to the core homeland of the FARC rebellion in Colombia. So when he rejoins. We will hear about that and much more. Just give us a moment while we troubleshoot here. One of the things that I'm particularly curious to ask him about the travels and his family history is having a Holocaust survivor in the family, what travels they have taken and to the concentration camp sites, and how they visit from that perspective. I visited out of historical interest, but not familial ties, and I've had very mixed feelings about, in some of the more famous ones, the almost carnival aspect of the sites, while others I've found have been particularly meaningful, and I feel both in terms of the presentation I've always felt and the sites I've visited has been respectful, but in terms of the visitors and the comportment of the visitors, that has been better. We have you back.
Okay, sorry.
Such things happen, but I was
It's like I went on a trip.
that we
I
will.
could hear you and I could see you, but I could not connect.
Okay, but we have you back, and I was talking with the audience about how I'm so curious. You mentioned your own family history, Holocaust survivor,
Yeah.
and as a student of history, I visited a number of the former concentration camp sites, and some are very quiet. Others, in terms of the way the visitors conduct themselves, almost feels like a carnival. And I'm wondering your perspective and how you, as a family, have visited. Which family members have been willing or not willing.
Yeah. My father came to Colombia in 29. So some of his family survived, but those who stayed behind in Poland, um, they all went to Treblinka. That's where they met their demise. My mother was born in Budapest in 42. She only came to Colombia in 57. So not only the war years, but communism. Uh, and most of her family went to Auschwitz. Some were shot along the Danube in Budapest, where the famous shoe monument by the river is. Some of those shoes could probably belong to family members. I visited a few camps: Dachau, Auschwitz, Treblinka, um, Babi Yar in Ukraine, not a camp, but another one of those sad places. And yes, what you say is true. Some people don't know how to behave when they visit. Some people are going there for the first time to learn because they're truly unaware of what happened or the magnitude. And there are, of course, many people that go in procession there because they feel it's a duty to visit and stay firm and remember and remind people of what happened there. So there's all sorts of of ways people approach the visit to the camps, but there's also many ways that that Jewish tourism is handled in Europe. I mean, places like Poland or Spain have really developed an industry. I mean, in Spain, they are coming up with, juderias from 500 years ago, from before the Inquisition. And
Mm-hmm.
in Poland, they're trying to reestablish Jewish characters to many towns, no?
Mm-hmm.
Setting up museums or memorials. And it's a thriving business. I mean, I can only hope that beyond the business there is the message, and especially in trying times like we're living right now, It's that message of tolerance is an important one to maintain and share.
Mm.
So yeah, I've done a lot of that, and there's plenty to do, and there's plenty to to learn. I've myself have learned a lot and found things like doing genealogy, going to the little towns of the family in what is now Ukraine,
Mm.
Mukachevo, that area near Lviv, or my father's side of the family in towns east of Warsaw, and being able to find documents, birth certificates, no? Or, as it happened to me, come face to face with skinheads who
Mm.
got mad because graffiti was painted in the monument, and I took it upon myself to buy some wipes and wash off the graffiti, and then had the thrill to meet with them face to face because they wanted the graffiti to stay, no? But likewise, there's also very nice stories. Yeah. There's a bit of everything.
Well, you're revealing this particular sense of humor that I'm wondering. There's so many places where we can visit the tragic aspects of history, and yet that humor that's reflected in so many different popular cultural outlets.
Yeah. Well, humor is a
Where are
way
places in the world to enjoy that joy, that fun performance, those aspects of Judaica?
Oh wow. Um, so many places in Europe, but I'm not gonna mention Europe because it's a given.
Uh-huh.
But getting to remote villages or cities in Siberia, no, or with the Jewish community in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa and Gondar, and I did that maybe 20 years ago when there was still a rather sizable community, no,
Hmm.
um, or spending Sabbath dinner in locations like Vietnam, or a Passover Seder in Kathmandu together with 1,000 other backpackers. That was back in 2000. I mean, those are really unique experiences that you know build in me a good sense of identity and belonging. And then meeting somebody in the middle of the Gobi Desert after not seeing anybody for 7 days, and find yourself that they are also eating kosher. It's very very unique.
Hmm.
So that's a good part of the type of trips that I enjoy doing. If not, trips that are totally devoted to the subject, at least, you know, as a sideline, it's something that I enjoy wherever I go. Finding the abandoned Jewish cemetery in Khartoum, Sudan, for instance, and being able to record it and write about it and upload that information onto to the blog. I mean, it's really nice, and then you start finding people that can say, "Oh, I was born in Khartoum and I had to leave in '56, and I've never seen a picture of that place since." So
Hmm.
it's very easy to connect with people, but there are few people that can share those stories.
Oh, it's
So
incredible,
it has
and
a nice significance to it.
I mean, so many ones to choose from. And when I was looking up, you mentioned out in Mongolia and that, and in along that part of the world, Russia even has a Jewish autonomous republic. And if you search online, the first Google results are, why does Russia have a Jewish autonomous?
Well, that's courtesy of Stalin and his desire to relocate the various peoples that lived in the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
But I mean, just like he did with the Kyrgyz or with the Tatars. No, he
Hmm.
tried to accomplish that with the Jews. So he figured out a place north of Manchuria, no,
Hmm.
and organized that. But it was a total failure. I mean, there's hardly any Jews there. There were very few that went to that Soviet paradise in the middle of nowhere. But
Hmm.
you go to Birobidzhan right now, and as you enter, you will find the those famous Russian signs as you enter the next oblast, written in Yiddish,
Hmm.
no? And the main square in Birobidzhan will have the menorah and a statue of a very Jewish character, but there's nothing Jewish about it.
Hmm.
Like it happens with so many other republics and okrugs in good old Russia. It's a name and very little more than that. But yeah, there's a Jewish republic north of Manchuria.
It's fascinating. And then you said that that area, as you say, is nothing Jewish about the area necessarily, but that region of the world. You reference communities in Mongolia. You said.
No, well, it was
Mm.
a random tourist that we
Ah.
came across in the middle of the Gobi,
Mm.
coming down from the Altai Mountains, which I must say it's one of the most spectacular sceneries that I've enjoyed. We did maybe 15 days along the western side of Mongolia,
That's one of
camping.
the highest on my wish list for trips.
Oh,
I've been looking for this summer before
oh,
plans interrupted.
beautiful place. And we timed it to coincide with Nadam Festival at the very end. So we got a good feel for Mongolia, and
Hmm.
especially because it was like 18 years ago,
Hmm.
16 years ago in '04, where
Hmm.
hardly any tourists were going there, and especially Western Mongolia. Yeah,
And Israel itself, and I've been wanting to have a episode dedicated to Israel travel. Is there's so many things for so many tastes and so many interests that
sure.
there's you almost can't have a wrong trip, but you could have better trips. So, what are some of the more out of the way or less known? I mean, there's say when you're driving around and you see a name that you recognize out of religious history and lore. It's to identify, but there's many places that are not as well known in
Oh, sure.
popular imagination.
There's a ton of places. Um, I remember when we were in junior year of high school, we spent a semester there, and we got to go to some places that some caves
Hmm.
that people don't go. It's such a small place with such heavy history, where
Hmm.
basically every rock that you come across has a history,
Hmm.
and a history belonging to so many people and cultures, civilizations over the years. Um, on my blog today, I posted an article about the Samaritans, for instance, an incredible group of people with millennial history, but a group of only 800 people uh, that remain. The story of the Good Samaritan in the New Testament. You know, the Samaritans still exist. They claim that 2,000 years ago there were, about 1 million people, and then with Byzantium they were uh, pretty much wiped out, and eventually over the years most converted to Islam. But there are two small communities, one in Kiryat Luza in the outskirts of Nablus or Shem, and the other one in the suburbs of Tel Aviv in Holon.
Hmm.
And to meet these communities and learn their history, they speak, ancient Hebrew and ancient Hebrew characters. Um, they're not Jewish. They don't claim to be Jewish, but they're the people of Israel because they claim to descend from the 10, what we Jews call the 10 lost tribes.
Mm.
Um, they found themselves. They're not lost to themselves. They're there, and they're a very, a very proud people with a beautiful history to tell. And if you like culture and traditions, to be able to spend their holidays, like their Passover celebrations. I mean, they still sacrifice goats,
Mm.
the way it was written in the Old Testament. So, you know, that's something very, very unique. Um, but yeah,
And I'm wondering,
other people there, the Circassians,
mhm,
or the Druze in Israel, to
yeah,
go see and meet with them, beyond the normal expected things about Judaism and Islam and Christianity. I mean, Israel can offer also, a myriad of things to see the Baha'i in Haifa, for instance. No?
you mentioned Haifa, and I'm thinking about we have so many young members in EPS that are, planned, say, the gap year or different travels and that, and the next couple of years of travel might not involve the kind of frequent mobility. So as well as this digital nomad culture, and
Hmm.
I'm thinking, beyond let's say Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, that would seem like obvious suggestions. Are there towns or cities that a young person starting their career or studying, learning, wanting to meet all different kinds of people that might be based, say, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? Like, is Haifa a place to suggest, or Acre? Uh,
Sure.
yeah.
In the north, there are some very nice places. In the Galilee,
Mhm.
is Sfat, which has a rather mystical air to it. Um, of course, Tel Aviv, there's plenty, but that's more well known.
Mhm.
Eilat in the deep south, in the
Mm.
Red Sea, far away from everything, is in many ways a different country,
Mm.
removed from the turmoil and the politics, no?
Mhm.
And it's a jump away from Jordan. Um, yeah, I mean, Israel has a lot of cities. There's no one big metropolis.
Mhm.
The population is well spread out, so there's a bit of everything. The way I see Israel, it would be a kinder place if it would cantonize the way Switzerland does. I mean,
Mm.
because there's so many identities, politics, extremes, you
Mhm.
know, and within every culture there. So one
Yeah.
thing is Tel Aviv, and if you're into to culture, or LGBT, I mean, that's the place to be.
Mhm.
If you are into religion, then go to Jerusalem. If you're mystical, go to Sfat.
Mhm.
If you're none of the above, you're very secular, then Haifa is a great place. If you
Mm.
want beach, go to Eilat, you know, uh, all within, a couple of hours.
Well, you said we were going to leave politics, but we're going to dip into a very different kind of
Yes,
politics, and
let's
we
do
will
it.
set the stage for your home country,
Sure.
Colombia, and this incredible trip you arranged just a few months ago, earlier this year, to really the first of any visitors being able to go to the FARC region.
We were the only ones, and we will remain for probably years to come the only ones that went to Marquetalia. Marquetalia is the historic heart of FARC rebellion. It's the place where the guerrilla started back in '64,
Hmm.
and a peace deal was signed 3 years ago. So now a good chunk of people that belong to FARC became, legal. Not everybody joined the peace deal. Some people are still fighting in the mountains and dealing in cocaine. So
Hmm.
it's a tough terrain.
Hmm.
There's no such thing as a true and meaningful peace deal in Colombia right now. But you know, it may be better in many ways. In certain areas are peaceful. Places that were totally off the radar for years and decades are now accessible. And Colombia is a beautiful place, underrated for people like ourselves, no?
Hmm.
And underexplored. So ETIC, Extreme Travelers International Congress, has done a few trips over the years to destinations such as Mogadishu, Baghdad, Chechnya, Sealand, the Siberian Arctic. And so this time I decided to come up with a you know wonderful idea of going to Marquetalia
Hmm.
and to gather all the players in peace and war in Colombia. So not just bring a group of travelers, but to do it together with former FARC rebels and the top commanders, all the way down to their foot soldiers, and to include with that army battalions, the UN, which was the backbone of the trip, the way I was able to organize and bring together all the groups, the Indian reservation in the area, the local communities, victims, and have something meaningful, all holding hands, if I may say that, to see that former enemies were able to join hand in hand for a cause and and do a very nice project. So 36 of us, travelers from about 20 countries, went to Marquetalia for 3 days, plus a day here in Bogota. But we mobilized upwards of 300 people to make this work. So it was quite an event, which started with a nice, elegant dinner here in Bogota with the director of the UN mission to Colombia and Timochenko, the former head of FARC, who's now president of the party, and their senators now. The FARC has 5 senators in the Colombian Congress. They were with us for dinner, and some of them went with us for the trip, which took 12 hours by road from Bogota. Uh, Long line of cars and minivans and police patrols and army troopers. So it was quite a sight until we got to the place where we spent the night, met with the locals, and then the following morning we drove about 2 hours in to make it even more fun. Russian Was jeeps until the end of the road, and from there we were able to choose either infantry or mules. Another 3 hours until we got to Marquetalia proper.
Hmm.
Spent the night there in tents, and then came back. It was arduous. It was tough terrain. We got some rain, so we got to sleep in the mud a little bit. But we were able to interact with everybody there, with historic figures and just the simple commoners. And we all came back with plenty of stories to tell. A lot of adrenaline was spent there. Very
Speaking
unique.
to that adrenaline, like when you described the trip to me, and I had the opportunity but was unable to join due to family travel conflicting. You said it's to see your enemy, not
Yeah,
in that
yeah, because
that personalization. I mean, it must be this and this is decades of incredible conflict and difficulty for your country, and that you've personally felt.
sure. I mean, when peace talks began in Colombia, I would ask myself time and again, how will I react if I ever see this SOB in front of me? No, if he signs the deal and all of a sudden he becomes, a legal citizen, and I walk into a restaurant and there he is, how will I react? And the day came. I was flown to Marquetalia a little bit over a year before the actual trip to start planning, and that's when I first met with FARC people. I mean, these were, certainly not the Robin Hoods. For as much as there is injustice and reasons to rebel, FARC was never popular in Colombia, and they still remain very unpopular. Cocaine in Colombia has played a huge part of, of violence, which discredits revolutions. So there's a lot of bloodshed. Colombia, for many years, was by far the number one country in kidnappings. So it was very, very tough and very, very bloody. So to all of a sudden say, okay, let's come to terms with what we have, and because I happen to to love travel and extreme travel, that was the motivation. I mean, it wasn't out of philosophical passion for the
Mhm.
peace process, for which I have to say I was not very I was not a fan of, because I read the 300 pages of the document. I didn't like what I read there, and there were many reasons why I was not a believer in it, and I still feel that way. But now it's fait accompli, it's there, so might as well make the best of it. So
Mhm.
why not do something that is travel related, that will bring in cream of the crop of the travel world to Colombia. We had, the heads of TCC, Nomad Mania, MTP, and ETIC. So it was a very nice reunion. And shortly before we went on the trip, I even got a nod from the office of the presidency of the republic here, which was not would not join us, but we got the nod. So uh, even for Colombia itself, it was a good experiment, you know,
Mhm.
to have such a group of people come, have fun, you know. It wasn't politicized. I don't think anybody that came for the trip politicized his or her participation. And it was a good exercise because we brought together, again, as I mentioned before, all the players. No,
Mhm.
we had the army, the police, the UN, victims, Indians, former guerrillas, current senators, journalists, you name it.
Wow.
So it was. I mean, very happy to have had organized that, and to know that it went well.
Yeah, and also I believe you were cautious to not romanticize it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I got some nasty comments from some people, because they friend of mine that could not understand how I could sit together with the likes of Timochenko, no,
Mhm.
or famous Dutch guerrilla Tanya Niemeyer, no,
Mhm.
um, and to have a glass of scotch with them,
Mhm.
and they have a point. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a fine line where you start to provide them with a theater for them to show off, and you know or not. Some people criticized me, again, as a son of a Holocaust survivor. You know?
Mhm.
Would I have met with you know Nazi commanders? No, but one of the things that for good or bad, whether I like it or not, or whether we like it or not, FARC, a political party, is now legal. No, there is a peace deal, and they're no longer sought after. They're common citizens of Colombia, and
Hmm.
for better or worse, we hope that this country will change for better. Personally, I don't think that there will ever be peace for as long as there is cocaine, and cocaine fetches high prices in the market. No? And that to me is what distorts Colombian reality and will distort it for decades to come if it remains illegal and therefore pricey. Colombia is not only about FARC. There's the
Hmm.
ELN. There's a good chunk of FARC that did not join the peace process, and some that did that decided to go back. And there's what in Colombia we call the paramilitaries. They are nothing but you know drug lords fighting their own war. So there's still plenty to accomplish in Colombia in terms of peace, and therefore, as tourists, the ability to access areas. Um, I mean, Colombia is a very unique place. You can look at the map in Iraq and Syria and know every day where each warring faction is, know who controls what.
Hmm.
You can do the same with Yemen. In 51 years that I've been a Colombian, I've never been able to figure that out. You don't know who controls what. You don't know who's who, because there's by now there's no identity within the warring factions. So so signing a peace with FARC is just one step. Good in many ways, but it's not real peace. And so it was a big question mark. But most people, I was surprised to see how well they took the fact that this was organized. And by this, I mean not the 36 of us that went on the trip, but friends, family, people that read my blogs and articles. The feedback was extremely positive,
Hmm.
and only very few exceptions that were very vocal against it. But no, no, fair and square.
You talk about seeing the world in shades of gray and not black and white, and
Hmm.
some political issues. I'm just wondering, the idea that if the United States were to decriminalize and legalize drugs such as cocaine, would that solve a lot of the problems that are inflicted on Colombia and
Oh, yeah,
similar countries in a similar situation?
sure. Yeah, 100%. Colombia was a prime producer of marijuana back in the day, in the
Mhm.
70s.
Mhm.
And then we were sold on the idea that we had to get rid of marijuana that was harvested mainly around the area of Ciudad Perdida, Sierra
Mhm.
Nevada de Santa Marta, for the travelers that have been there, and the Guajira Peninsula up north. And now pot is grown, in Arizona
Mhm.
and Colorado.
The convenience store on my street, the only
Of
convenience
course,
store I
of
have is a
course. So
pot
it,
shop.
it, it makes you wonder, what's the rationale behind these these crops and legality. I'm sure that things will change dramatically should cocaine become legal. I mean, then it becomes, we'll have other issues to deal with once it becomes legal. But if it's legal, a lot of the problems in Colombia will the bloodshed.
Hmm.
The thing is that in Colombia, by now we have had two generations that have grown in this ambiance of mafias and guerrilla and war. So with that comes a lot of corruption. The mentality behind easy money. and that's a hard one to shed immediately, just by a decree that legalizes cocaine.
Hmm.
So it's a long process, but if it comes to a vote, just like 3 years ago, I wouldn't have voted for the peace deal because I happen to not be in Colombia. What are the odds? So I didn't get to vote. I would have voted no on the peace deal, but I would vote yes if it comes to legalizing. I should mention, by the way, for the people who don't know um, facts about Colombia, the referendum voted down the peace deal. I mean, most Colombians voted against the peace deal. We have a peace deal only because the president shoved it down our throats to a not so kosher Congress. If I may step into politics beyond tourism, but that's reality. I mean, most Colombians voted against the peace deal. I mean, this is how crazy this place can be. Um, and yeah, if there's no, when you compare the situation to other revolutions that started, together with the Cuban Revolution, you know, revolutions that got inspired, say, in Salvador, Guatemala, and whatnot. They're no longer there. The only one remaining is in Colombia, not because of ideals, but because there was something that could fuel and give support to any group, and that was cocaine.
What is it like to be a hotelier?
Ha. Um, well, I can get to say that I spent every day of my life in a hotel because, if I'm at home, I'm in a hotel. And if I'm not, then I'm in a hotel. So I do get to say that I live in a hotel 365 days of the year. I've had the hotel in Bogota for now, well, 25 years, and 20 that I've been running it. Before that, I was a flower grower. That's Colombia is big on flowers. We're the largest provider of flowers to the U.S. market. Just about 2 out of every 3 flowers consumed in the U.S. comes from Colombia, and
Really?
basically like a 10-mile radius from where I am. That's all greenhouses in this area. There's about 25 cargo plane loads that leave Bogota to the U.S. every day, filled with flowers.
Hmm.
Um, so I did that for 15 years, and now 20 years I've been in the hotel business. Right now, under COVID, what can I say? In Colombia, we've had very serious quarantine. I haven't been out in almost 5 months, with the exception of 3 days, and that's the case for a lot of people here. Numbers are going through the roof. There's no domestic flights, certainly no international flights, and you can't even drive out of town if you don't have permits. So the lockdown has been very serious, and of course that takes a toll on the hotel and tourism industry. I myself decided to remain open, and few hotels did the same.
Mhm.
Uh, in part because I wanted to maintain myself mentally healthy. I felt that this was going to last long. I didn't know at the time how wrong I was because this is really getting wrong.
Mhm.
But I felt that I wanted to remain active, and it could even be beneficial if I would be one of the few to remain open. Fact of the matter is, um, the industry in Colombia now has maybe 3% occupancy,
Hmm.
and thank God I'm doing 40% with
Wow.
low rates. I mean, I have a unique product. It's sweets, so it's easy for people to stay here long term. So I have some people that have been here, for the duration of this quarantine. Um,
And that's interesting, if I could interrupt about sweets, that my wife and I have found that many of the hotels in the US the past decade, what they call our suites, have just a small partition that doesn't actually mean a separate room. And when we're spending all the time in the room and we need to work, we need to Zoom, that having an actual suite is quite rare and valuable.
well, you can become my spokesperson. The history behind this hotel is that while I was a flower grower, my father was into construction, a developer. This was the very last project that he did, and it was conceived as a condo, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and it coincided with the one time that the Colombian economy went sour. That was in the mid '90s. You have to understand that for as difficult as things can be in Colombia, you and I went to Wharton. They taught us
Mhm.
economics in a way that often enough does not apply. Just like you don't understand how the Dow Jones can be doing so well right now. Same thing happens to
Yeah.
Colombia.
Mhm.
With all the war and the kidnappings and the mess, Colombian economy has been the only one in Latin America that always kept the pace, except for the mid '90s.
Mm.
So things were not selling, and we decided to flip this project and halfway through convert it into a hotel. So this is why we have such a unique product. It's, the 1 and 2 bedroom suites, but
Mhm.
with all the hotel services and a small convention center. I have 7 meeting rooms, and I can cater to 300 people here and 150 people there. So it's a unique product that has allowed me to maintain levels always above the market. Whatever the market is doing, thankfully I've been doing better. Like now, but you know, we're playing it a day at a time.
Mhm.
We have to come up with all the COVID protocols for everything. Um, Hardly any tangible incentives from the government. The few things that were given to this industry were taken back. Um, so 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 when I look at my P&L, it's you know the law of the jungle, and and it's tough, and it's tough for the hotel and the tourism industry, and it's tough for a lot of industries in Colombia because there were about 120 countries that got COVID infection because before the first case got to Colombia,
Mm.
and now lately, I mean, for the past 1 or 2 weeks, many days we've been, per 1 million inhabitants, we've had the highest numbers of deaths.
Mm.
Right now, we're like uh, fifth in the world in daily cases. We're probably at 14 right now total, and numbers keep on climbing after almost 5 months of very, very strict confinement. So can't say where we're gonna go, where we're gonna end up. We're just playing it a day at a time. In the meantime, I keep myself occupied, entertained, and whenever I'm not with the hotel, I'm with my blog, and then God bless for Saturday mornings, EPS travel trivia, which has been a blessing for me. I know it's been a lot of fun for a lot of other people.
Fantastic. Mehul in the comments, he's asking if you've ever been to the Darien Gap. If not, do you have a desire to? And
Okay,
what do you
Darien Gap is a tricky concept
think?
because pretty much everybody that I know that has claimed to have done the Darien Gap has not really done it because they go along the Caribbean coast from Capurganá in Colombia to Sapsurro and La Miel in Panama, and from there maybe by boat onto San Blas Islands. But that's not tough. It's beautiful. I mean, San Blas Islands is one of the nicest places that I've been to, and the trip is beautiful, but it's not tough. It's not the gap proper. Um, when organizing for ETIC to Marquetalia, I did meet with a Chilean journalist who's done the gap, and by the gap I mean like if you take the halfway point in between, both oceans in the isthmus,
Mm-hmm.
and you cross north south,
Mm-hmm.
that's crossing the Darien Gap for me, and that's really crazy. Actually, I wasn't planning, but I have it right by me. This is the book that this guy wrote about the cocaine trade, where he traced the whole industry along the continent, and he's done the Darien Gap many times, north south and also east west,
Mm-hmm.
across from the Caribbean to the Pacific, no? But the true crossing would be north south in the halfway mark of the isthmus, and that's something that you know only a handful of people do it, and more often than not, people don't get back home. I mean, it's really, really a serious place. I mean, this is the place where constantly illegal migrants from Syria, Yemen, Nepal, Afghanistan, China are crossing, and you're always hearing very nasty stories. So certainly not a place that I would recommend to try.
How about the Amazon region? I think we hear Amazon, and a lot of certainly American, United States feel like they picture Brazil, yet you've got this Amazon region in Colombia. What are the tourism opportunities there?
Yeah, well, the easy option is to fly into Leticia, which is the southernmost tip of the country, bordering Tabatinga in Brazil and from across the river from Peru. But that's a city. I think the place now has maybe 30,000 inhabitants just on the Colombian side, and and when you get there, there's traffic along the river, so it's not the real jungle experience. If you really want to feel that you're in the thickness of the true Amazon, it'll take you at least 2 hours upriver from Leticia to Puerto Nariño, and from there the many rivers into Colombia or Peru. There's beautiful places, Caballo Coche and Cuchillo Coche are some beautiful spots on the Peruvian side where you can swim with the most majestic pink dolphins,
Mm.
like true pink, and in really isolated places, not urban touristy sites. Other than that area of the true Amazons, the Amazonian jungle can provide you with many alternatives in Colombia. There's Chiribiquete National Park, which we did by plane, a flyover in late January, 2 hours over the park, and it took 2 hours from Bogota to get to the place from where we took off to do that flyover. Beautiful scenery,
Mm.
but you cannot access it by land or by river right now. It's because of its unique fauna and flora, which is, I think, a misnomer for you know a terrain that has not yet been pacified and controlled by the government.
Mm.
Um, with beautiful petroglyphs and some very remote Indian tribes. But the only way to do it right now is you rent your own Cessna.
Mm.
It I think we paid about 1,100 a piece for that flyover. Other places in the jungles, like borderline-ish jungle, the Caño Cristales, the River of Five Colors, and something truly remote that I did back in '94 was the Guaviare in Irida, and eventually along the Orinoco River, uh, along the border between Colombia and Venezuela, no man's land. Um, no, hardly any people. Beautiful landscape, beautiful landscape. Mavicure Rocks in Guinea, at the bottom southern part of that trip. Some people are doing now Hirihirimo Falls in Vaupés, which is the Vaupés River that eventually becomes the Black River that flows into the Amazons in Manaus, that general area of Colombia. Beautiful, beautiful falls that again you access by flying one day from Bogota to Mitu, and then next day uh, they fly you to another place from where you take a raft for a few hours until you get to the village where you spend the night, and then the next day you have to walk a few hours until you get to the falls. I mean that's the type of adventure that Colombia can provide you. Certainly not the places. I mean, if you wanna do the jungles in Colombia, not the places where you will find the line of buses, with the tour guides
Mhm.
telling you, you have to move because the next bus is coming there. You will never find that in the places that Colombia has to offer. So for those that have the desire to get muddy and take some challenges and maybe miss the flight and have to spend an extra night in a hammock or get bitten by all sorts of weird insects, yeah, I mean it's a wonderful place.
My first trip to South America, I did not hear Spanish for the first three countries. And when you wrote your TCC profile, you said the only true disappointment would be to go to two of the most exciting places as well, Suriname and Guyana, because of their infinite capacity to turn the most trivial of matters into absolute and chaotic of nightmares.
Did I write all of that? Wow.
Yes, so there must
Yes,
be stories
yes.
to that.
I mean, the Guyanas are these places that you know don't belong to South America. I mean, when it comes to what we call football, there are no teams from either of these places, no, and you don't fly from Bogota to Georgetown or Paramaribo, no.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like until COVID, but finally there were flights from Copa would fly from Panama to both those cities, but you know for the most part, you had to go from Bogota to Miami to Trinidad to
Mhm.
Paramaribo or whatever. I mean, it was, you know, ridiculous. And and and, and likewise, it was that far away in every possible way, culturally. I mean, because you have the, you know, Hindus and Muslims, um, nothing to do with Catholic South America. So I always wanted to visit the Guyanas. I finally made it back in 2013, you know? and and it was absolutely wonderful. But everything was just nightmarish. The visa, the return visa, they are not going to let you go through, that you have to go back to the hotel, you have to buy another ticket to the next day, and the tour guide that would not arrive on time, and everything was a hassle. But again, if you have the spirit this is what you like, then it's part of the adventure. But I mean, unnecessary hardships, you know, one after the other, without end. But beautiful places. And going back to what you were asking me before in the beginning about Judaica, Paramaribo is known for having a beautiful Dutch style synagogue right next to a beautiful big mosque. But not only that, there is a place called Yoden Savane, which is 3 hours up the river in the jungle in Suriname, which 150 or up until 150 years ago was a place full of sugar plantations, and there was a Jewish community there. So if you get to Jordan Savannah, you can find two cemeteries deep in the jungle and the ruins of a synagogue from the late 1600s and all the way up until mid or late 1800s. So those are the fun places that I like to reach.
If we're visiting a Jewish cemetery, such as you just mentioned, or a synagogue, and we know very little about the religion, what should we look for to contextualize and experience those visits?
Well, in a place like the jungles of Suriname, just the fact that there was a synagogue there. Uh, the people that made it to these latitudes were Sephardi Jews that were kicked out of Spain with the Inquisition in 1492,
Mm.
that lived as hidden Jews for over 100 years until they got to liberated Holland, where they were able to go back to practicing Judaism,
Mhm.
and like good Dutchmen, sailed the world.
Hmm.
And they were the ones who brought sugar to the Americas. So the first synagogue built in the continent was in Recife in Brazil, and you can still go and visit the ruins of Kahal Tzur Israel synagogue in Recife, in Rue des Judeos, the street of the Jews in Recife, the old part of town. And from there, well, at that time I was French. When the Portuguese got to Recife, they were kicked out. And from there, they started wandering along the coast. So they settled in Paramaribo and in Jordan Savannah. And from there, they went to Barbados, Curacao, the Virgin Islands, Charleston, Savannah, Providence, Rhode Island, and whatnot. So there, in places like that, you want to look for the type of names, last names, whether they're Ashkenazi or Sephardi. In this case, they're Sephardi Jews. Uh, some tombs, these are highly um, refined tombstones. Um, Also in places like in Curacao or even in Altona in Hamburg. The Jewish cemetery in Altona is a World Heritage Site, and there you find depictions of the trades of the people. So not only will you find a Star of David or the hand of the priests, like in Star Trek, no, but you will also find, for instance, pirate figures because they were merchants and pirates that sailed the seven seas, and that's very unique. If you go to the cemeteries in Curacao, the last names are very unique because eventually they assimilated and became Catholic. But you will have a tomb of a Maduro right next to a tomb of a Capriles, which today are the president and the head of the opposition in Venezuela. No? and very elaborate uh, tombstones. You go to a Jewish cemetery, usually you will not find statues, no, but very plain stones. Uh, but in places like Curacao, they're extremely ornate. Um, what other oddities or what things uh, you can see in cemeteries? Well, they tell you the the history of the community,
Mhm.
how old they are. It tells you the story of migrations.
Mhm.
You go to you find cemeteries in Bogota, in Colombia. They will have tombs that will date back only to 100 years ago because that's how old the community is, and by the languages they will tell you where they came from. So you will be able to tell that 2/3 came from Romania, Poland, Lithuania, and a third came from um, the Mediterranean, whether Aleppo, in the case of Colombia, the Sephardim are mainly from Syria, some from the Balkans, Egypt, some Moroccan. So personally, I like cemeteries, if I may say that, because they can tell a lot about the history without having to ask people for the story. I mean, you just read the markers, the dates, the names, and you can tell the story.
Incredible. And that brings us back full circle to Benjamin of Tudela and the
Yes.
legacy that you continue with your incredible travels, your knowledge that you've shared, and your perspectives. Thank you for joining us tonight, Jack.
Thank you so very much. I enjoyed it. And all of you guys listening, you have a place in Bogota. Come and visit and enjoy a country that has a lot to offer to tourists. And I know that, you know, it's not very well explored. So it will have a lot of surprises for most of you.
And advance of a few hours, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.